So if this candidate here, for whatever party, was informed about the concerns about our concerns about the environment, what can a local candidate do against the bloc of either government or the opposition? It seems to me they're completely encapsulated by policy of government once they get into government, and local candidates seem not to do very much about it.
That one's for you. Can you stay pure? I mean, do you have to look at the reality that you're not going to be Prime Minister and that you might have to horse trade if you're in that position?
I want to be really clear. I don't want to be Prime Minister. I want to represent the people of North Sydney in the House of Representatives in Canberra to make sure we're getting action and traction in the areas that are important to us. I think that this question here from the street speaks to the heart of people in North Sydney want faster action on climate. The two major party targets are not acceptable. Even the Business Council of Australia has come out and said they can commit to a 50% reduction target, yet still we have a Labor target that is under that. Zali Steggall, who is a sitting independent, one of four, who currently sits in the House of Reps, has tabled some very sound, robust legislation to introduce the climate change bills. Now, those bills provide a framework that both of these major parties have chosen to not pursue. But what I will say is when it went into parliamentary discussion, it was blocked by the Liberal National Party, but it was supported by the Labor Party. We need to get legislation put into our House that is not owned by either or and is actually what's best for the country, and that's what independents bring.
Net zero by 2030?
No.
60% reduction in emissions by 2030.
Correct.
So is that your red line?
Oh, this red line is a lovely phrase that our current Prime Minister has drawn, isn't it?
It's a good one.
Yeah, look, I think, can I be really clear? The discussion we need to be having at the federal government level is how do we keep our planet below 1.5 degrees warming? And in fact, I think sometimes numbers like these targets get thrown around as a distraction point. The bottom line is, as a nation, we need to move faster. We need to move faster.
Let's talk about your target, though, because that's where it's at, and this is where the framework begins.
Yeah.
So how flexible are you on that target?
I've said from the beginning it would be between 50 to 60%, but I believe if the Business Council of Australia has come out and said they can do 50%, we should set them something that is more ambitious.
Right.
But
so
that's
you are
where
flexible.
the bills... Yeah, but the bills come back. The Climate Change Commission, which is what is fundamental to Zali's bills, actually sets 5-yearly carbon reduction targets, and it's a way of holding our government accountable to achieving those. So I would actually look to the experts and the science to guide what that number should be.
Do you think your party could meet that?
Well, no, we've made our position clear. We are committing to the position we took to the last election.
Is it clear? Sorry, let's just take a step back.
It is.
Matt Canavan says one thing in Queensland, you say another thing here. So
I certainly say another thing to Matt Canavan. I have no problems in saying that, but I'm pleased that the PM's on my side on this debate and not Matt Canavan's. And we are committed, and it's something I fought really hard for last year to secure our net zero commitment, which I think is important because it provides an endpoint to our journey, and I'm pleased that that endpoint is also supported by the Labor Party. So there is bipartisanship on where we're going. There'll be arguments about how we get there, as there already are, but we do know where we're heading, and I think that's important. But I do want to come back to a couple of things that Kylie said, because I think this is one of the challenges that voters have with an independent, because essentially if you're in a party, and the party system's not without its faults, as Catherine and I probably have both experienced, but it provides a responsibility on us to outline how we're going to do things, what our policies are, how much they're going to cost. Whereas an independent can come along without any of that detail. And just in her last answer, we saw Kylie say that if she gets to Parliament, she wants the fuel excise reduction removed, which is benefiting something like 90,000 people who have a car in my electorate. She doesn't want the federal government to fund roads anymore, which means the states will be pushing for a higher GST, no doubt. And she also supports a road user charge. Now, can I tell you, as someone who's taken an interest in electric vehicle policy, I actually have been arguing against the Labor government in Victoria and the Liberal government in South Australia as they attempted to put a road user charger in place, because that will actually make it more difficult to encourage people to have electric vehicles rather less. And similarly on climate policy, Kylie's position is there should be a commission that decides these things. Yet last September she was saying that politicians, the Parliament, should annually decide what the target is for emissions reductions.
When was that?
On the 28th of September, in your comments to Phil Curry of the Australian Financial Review, you said that basically the Parliament should be annually setting what our emissions is. Zali has said, which Kylie presumably is backing as one of her teammates, is that the commission that she proposed should set our 2030 target. But yet here we have candidates saying what that target should be.
No, I want to be really clear. I support Zali Steggall's climate bills, and I believe they're the best way forward.
I think that's the problem, because they're
nation.
saying one thing on one hand, 60% target, but on the other, shouldn't be politicians deciding these things. Well, that's exactly what's
Catherine, should it be politicians deciding these things, elected officials?
No, politicians should be responsible for the promises they make to the electorate. That's the Westminster system of responsible government. We should declare a target, and by the way, numbers do matter. So 43%, which is the Labor Party's 2030 target, 43% reduction on emissions on 2005 levels.
Is it flexible?
No, because it's been so carefully worked through in a 52-page plan, an actual plan to achieve it, that has all parts of the economy working towards achieving that target. So it is actually achievable, which is totally different to anything that we've heard from any of the independents running around making big promises about what can be achieved. And it's a plan that will drive forward the economy at the same time. So it was devastating. I was teaching at the time to watch Scott Morrison stand up in Glasgow and say, well, the people who are going to make the decisions about climate in Australia, they're not even in the room. And I saw the faces of my students fall, and they realised that there was an utter lack of leadership and trust and integrity on the climate issue. And we've seen that again, I'm sorry, Trent, in the past couple of days, members of the National Party running around telling us that zero by 2050 was dead in the water. I think we have to acknowledge the despair that brings to the young people of our electorate.
Policy. Thankfully, that's not the government's
But
policy.
you govern in a minority position, Trent. So you can only move as far as the National Party lets you move.
Well, that's actually not right, because I took a position, along with a number of my colleagues, arguing for net zero by 2050. We fought really hard for it, because I know that there's strong support for that in my own community, and that's what I think is the right thing to do.
Has it been legislated?
Barnaby Joyce was opposed to that. On an issue like that, we prevailed, and that is about making sure the long-term plan. No, because it's an international commitment, and only a very few number of countries actually legislate their
your
targets.
party, your Prime Minister, made an international commitment in Glasgow to return to COP this year with a stronger 2030 target. The ink was barely dry on that promise to the world when Scott Morrison was saying to Barnaby and his mates, oh, no way we'll ever do anything that increase, the pathetic Tony Abbott targets.
Well, of course, the Tony Abbott's targets are ones that Malcolm Turnbull put forward. They're ones that we took to the last election. But what's been important for me, as someone who wants more ambition on climate change, is that we've made it clear to the international community and to Australians that we expect, with the transition that is now so rapidly happening, that we should be able to get to 35% by 2030. And of course, soon we'll be putting forward our targets for 2035. And I'm going to be pushing for them to be even stronger still, as I'm sure they will be, because we're seeing this incredible transformation already happening. And it's exciting in many ways to see how quickly sectors like the energy sector are moving. Already something like a third of our electricity is coming from renewable sources. Our emissions are down 20% over 2005
Trent,
levels.
that's not true.
They are down. They are down.
No, they are not down.
They
True
are down by
emissions are up
20%.
by 7%. And if you
True
take
emissions, what
out
does that mean?
land clearing, you claim 20% because you are constantly calculating in the delayed land clearing. So let's be really clear with the Australian public. You used a lot of federal money, thank you very much, to promote green credentials for your government that you have not delivered. The gains in renewable and sustainable energy across this country, let's be really clear, have not been made by the federal government. It is by state government policy that has driven significant change for our country. And our federal government is, in fact, being dragged kicking and screaming, very happily investing $22,000 every minute in fossil fuel subsidies, while the state governments are doing the heavy lifting on renewable and sustainable energy.
So I do need to respond to that, because the way in which you measure your climate emissions is outlined in, I think, the 1992 United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. It deals with issues like land use, and it is an international way in which you assess these things. Now, of course, this is a partnership between the federal government, the states, even local government, and our citizenry as well, who are part of the process of making sure we reduce our emissions. But our emissions have come down by 20% in accordance with those standards, faster than other countries, and 90% of those countries around the world that have signed up to the convention are using the same land measurements as we are. In fact, 44% of our reductions have come as a result of the ERF, that's a federal government program, and the renewable energy target, which the federal government has had in place. So, so that's how we've got there.
Okay.
Trent, we're an international pariah when it comes to energy policy. You must admit the absolute scolding we cop every time an international leader stands up and calls for us to move faster. It puts us in a place where Australia is clearly identified as a laggard in this area. So while I respect that you feel that the world is looking at us positively, I would suggest that when you actually look at what is on the record, we are constantly being told we must do better, and we can do better, and we should do better for our kids.
But at what cost? At what cost?
There doesn't need to be a cost if it is planned carefully. Nobody in the independent
There is always a
movement
cost for
is
transition
arguing.
in the immediate term.
Yes, but we can't transition at all if we do not plan.
Do you remember what happened to Bill Shorten at the last election when he couldn't answer this question? What the cost of his climate change policies were?
I will answer your question, Laura. I grew up in a small country town called Coonabarra out in northwest New South Wales. And what I can tell you about rural and regional economies and towns is they are incredibly resilient. If we're going to stand here and debate today, I can tell you right now, the people of Kurri don't want a new gas power plant. They want a future for their kids. So why wouldn't we be prioritising renewable and sustainable energy development out there, getting them jobs, getting them training? So I think what's really important... Yes, I have.
Okay, but how do you think they'd feel about someone in North Sydney telling them what they want?
I'm not telling them what to do. I'm trying to advocate for their voice because I know that's where we're at.